Okay, well, I think we'll get started. Welcome everyone to Career Conversations with Alumni. Our focus today is advice from alums who graduated in the 2008-2009 economic downturn. We're really excited to have you here today. We're especially excited for our panelists that you're going to get to hear from today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Megan Spalding. I'm a career advisor with the Albers Placement Center. The Albers Placement Center is the career center for the business school. So we serve undergrad and grad students in Albers who, with anything career related, career needs. And then we're doing this event in partnership with the Career Engagement Office. They serve science and engineering, arts and sciences, and nursing. So welcome to students from all of those colleges across campus. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple housekeeping items of kind of how we're going to do this today. We're going to go ahead and keep everyone muted for now, just to cut down on distractions so that you can hear the panelists easily. And then we're going to save questions for more towards the end. So if you have a question that you don't want to forget, you can add that into the chat box and we'll make sure to ask that at the end. At the end, if you have a question, just click on participants and click on the button to raise your hand, and then we will unmute you so that you can interact with the panelists and ask your question. And then also we are recording this. So if you need to leave early or you wanted to share this with a friend who couldn't attend, please reach out to us afterwards and we're happy to provide the recording. I think we'll try to email it out to everyone attending as well. So again, thank you, welcome. We're doing this, this idea actually came from some students who suggested it. Thank you to those of you who suggested this idea. We know this is a challenging, very uncertain time, especially for many of you who are about to enter the job market. And so we thought it might be encouraging and helpful to hear from those who've kind of gone before and have been through a situation kind of similar. The job market back in 2009 was challenging. It was a down market. And we just thought hearing some advice from people who successfully navigated that might be helpful for you. So let's get to our panelists. I'm gonna allow them to do a brief intro, but let me tell you who we have with us today. Stephanie Allison is a marketing professional in the Bay Area. She graduated in 2009 with an international business major. We have Chris J., who's the Senior VP and Wealth Management Advisor at Merrill Lynch. He graduated in 2009 with a finance major. And we have Sean Klostermann, who's a sales program manager at Boeing. He also graduated in 2009 with an economics major. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. And maybe, Steph, if you wanna just give us a brief kind of intro, and then as quick as you can, kind of synopsis of, what was the first job you went into after college? And what has the last 10 years looked like?
Yeah, of course. I'm so excited to be here today, everyone, and happy to help out. I don't envy the uncertainty that we're all in, and especially as folks that are nearing or at the end of their college career, it's definitely a stressful time. So happy to be helping out. My career path is one that's kind of all over the place. So I'm happy to share insights from that. My first job out of college, just because I was having a rough time finding work in Seattle, was actually a year-long internship for a law firm in London. So I did immigration paralegal work for my first year out of college. And then upon returning to Seattle, actually landed a bit of a dream job with a company there called Pacific Market International. I ran their sustainability and got to travel to Asia and do all of these great, cool things. And then the Bay Area was calling my name. I really wanted to move out of consumer products and try my hand at tech. And so I made the jump down here where I still am and worked for a long time at Pandora. So I started in ad sales and then moved into marketing, and I've continued in marketing for the last several years. So it's been a bit of a wild ride. I'm happy to share some of the ups and downs with that through these questions that we'll all be talking about.
Great, thanks, Steph. Chris, if you want to go ahead and kind of let us know, kind of where did you start out and what has it looked like for you the last 10 years or so?
Sure. So yeah, I graduated like my other panelists here in 2009, and I've been with Merrill Lynch ever since. So I think our graduation date was like mid-June of '09, and then I got my offer letter July 4th or 5th. But prior to that, I mean, I had spent certainly all of senior year and even earlier trying to find a job, and so Merrill Lynch was actually one of my internships, and that's how I got the job, which I'll talk more about later. But I will be celebrating my 11th year this July, which is crazy. It makes me feel very old. It's been quite an 11 years already. It's a job that's certainly very dynamic, but it's been terrific. I love what I do. I love where I do it, and feel very fortunate and realize I'm like the worst millennial for being at the same company forever. So happy to talk about why that's unusual too. But yeah, pleasure to be here with everybody today.
Great, thanks, Chris. And Sean, if you want to
Hi, everyone. Yeah, absolutely. My name's Sean Klostermann. I, as you heard, work at Boeing, and graduated from Seattle U in 2009. During the summer of 2008, which I think was kind of when the financial crisis really was at its peak, I was doing an internship at Boeing. And so like Chris, I've been at Boeing ever since then, but my path was still, I think, interesting and relevant to all of you on the phone, because I did my internship. At the end of the internship, they offered me my dream job, an offer, kind of a dream start of a career at Boeing, which was entering into a rotation program. And then I went back to school for my last year, my senior year. And during the winter, when really everything had set in as to how bad things were in the economy, and I happened to be studying abroad in Africa, in Tanzania, I got an email from Boeing saying that they wanted to have a phone call with me, which kind of made my stomach drop, and for good reason. They called and said, we're laying off thousands of employees right now, and unfortunately, we're going to rescind your offer, and we're not going to bring you back. So only a few months before graduation, I had nothing, and was probably in a similar situation to a lot of you, trying to figure out what my path was going to be. And going from the peak of being offered a job at the company I'd always want to work for because I'm an aviation geek, and not only that, but a rotation program where I thought would be a really great basis for my future long career at Boeing that I expected, I had nothing. But I immediately pivoted into my network. I think we all know that jobs often come from people so people I had met through my internship, and was incredibly lucky through not only my relationships, but honestly through Seattle U and the relationships Seattle U had with some of these executives at Boeing, because it was an executive who was very connected with Boeing, who saw my situation, took pity on me, and had luckily some opportunities. And I can talk about that because there are areas of the economy and businesses that will be booming in this kind of situation. And they had a need. And though I didn't necessarily have the experience, they plugged me in there. And I've been able to then kind of continue that trajectory that I'd always hoped at the very beginning that I'd have, and have been since then. After that experience for a short amount of time, then I actually got into sales and marketing, and have been in marketing and sales for the last 9 years at Boeing. So, and that's what I do now.
Great, thank you, everyone. I think this is so good because you guys have enough different stories. I think different people are going to be able to see their situation in yours. So that's great. A lot of things we can cover, but what tactics do you feel were most impactful for you in your job search that senior year, particularly with a challenging job market? What do you think was like the thing that really helped or impacted the most? Whoever wants to go.
I'm happy to start. Echoing off of Sean and Chris, I would say one of the most impactful things that I did my senior year was I unfortunately didn't have parents that could support me through college, and so I was working full-time bartending. And going into my senior year, I was like, ooh, I really gotta maybe think about pivoting this and getting some internships, and went that direction. And to supplement some of my finances, got a job on campus with Gail Yates, who's no longer there, but all of you that are at, like on staff at Seattle U, I'm sure know her. And the job was in the Alumni Relations Department. And so not only did I get to start interacting more with alumni, but Gail herself and the wealth of knowledge through her whole career and her connections at Seattle U, she really orchestrated my entire early career. Like, I told her I was coming to do this and would be like gushing about her because it's true. I mean, having a network that can have a few key people where you can kind of fall under their wing and soak up their knowledge and their advice was so pivotal to my early steps. I think I didn't really have the patience to wait for a job in Seattle because I had a lot of student loans that were going to be hitting soon. And so I was kind of like grasping at straws for everything. And so I think the other key tactic was just being really flexible. And so the internship that I took in London, it didn't pay a lot, but it was a really great experience to not only be abroad, but also to put my loans in deferment for an extra year because I was also going to school there. It was part of the visa requirements. And be flexible enough to take this chance that I never would have even dreamed would, come across my set of opportunities. And so, yeah, tactics, really lean on Seattle University and the resources you have there. There's so many knowledgeable people and well-connected alumni, and then be flexible because it might not be what you imagined. But London in general was, I think, one of the best years of my entire life, which I'm like, oh, I hope that wasn't the peak because that was pretty early on, but it was amazing.
I totally echo that about London. So that's where I studied abroad and I lived there. And that's actually where I wanted to go work and live after graduating from Seattle U. And I'll maybe tell everyone that story if there's time at the end, because Megan knows it well. It has to deal with me may or may not crying in her office at any rate. So as far as tactics, I mean, I echo, relying on the network of Seattle U. It really is fantastic. And so wanting to get into finance during the middle of the financial crisis, I mean, ignorance is bliss in some ways. And so I guess maybe my first suggestion is it's okay to just kind of go through the world with some blinders and rose-colored glasses on to some extent, because I didn't, know that was probably, my chances would be lower. But in some ways it can make your chances higher. To Sean's point, I mean, there's industries that'll actually probably be very well positioned to come out of this, and finance is likely one of them. But at any rate, so as I mentioned earlier, my internship really was key to me getting hired. And so I interned at Merrill my sophomore year, I think beginning of the summer of my sophomore year, and then continued on and actually found out that the internship was available through the placement center. And so that's probably not an opportunity I would have been aware of had I not, made use of that. And also, Megan was very good at encouraging me to rely on Seattle U's alumni network. And the thing about, alums and anyone who's part of the SU community is that we want to help the SU community. And so it can be, as easy as just having a conversation and, being a mentor and providing someone encouragement. But oftentimes those warm connections will be able to put some opportunities on your radar that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. And so I did that. Same with my high school alumni network. And then, I think my Albers mentor, actually, who I still keep in some contact with, was very helpful. And then guest speakers that would come to class, especially senior year, like when we had, the co-founder of Costco come, and if you have an opportunity to shake their hand and follow them on LinkedIn and stay in touch, I mean, you'd just be surprised at the people who will have coffee with you. So networking in all of its forms, and then if you've had the opportunity to have an internship, certainly taking advantage of that.
Yeah, just to add, I think both Stephanie and Chris covered great points. They're just two things that I would, I guess, say, maybe not relevant to the question, but suggestions I have nonetheless. I could see how it's easy, especially listening maybe to Chris and I, we were coming off of internships and stuff, to look at the past and to beat yourself up for decisions you made or decisions you didn't make. But I think you have to let go of the past, and it is wasted time to worry about what you maybe didn't do or what you feel like you should have done. We're all in the place that we are right now, and we can only look at the future. We can't control, or go back. And so, although I think it's really difficult, it's easy to say, but difficult to do, I think it's really important to try to let go of the past and look towards the future. And I think the three of us are proof that the future can be very bright, and you're gonna have a really great future. And the other thing I would mention is I think some of our feedback about network and reaching out to resources, whether it be Gail Yates or your mentor or something, I think you need to do that, but don't fall into the trick of thinking that it's going to be done for you, that you're going to reach out to someone and it's going to fall into your lap. You have to take ownership of where you are and your future, and you need to put in the effort and really work to make things happen. No one's going to do it for you, but don't take that in a bad way, that as a scary mountain in front of you. Look at it as a challenge that everyone's in right now. Again, things can turn out really positively out of this.
Oh, that's great, everybody. Thank you. And Sean, you're actually perfectly leading me into my next question for you. Obviously, there's a lot more candidates in the market now, right? Some with a lot of experience, right?
Yeah.
So if it's not coming together right away for folks, if you were looking to hire right now, what would you be looking for from people to help them stand out from the pack? What would be things that would impress you of how they managed maybe this time, if it's taking a while to find a job, or just in general, what are some skills or things? I know it kind of depends on the industry as well, but in general, what would be some things that you would be like, oh, this is impressive, I want to interview this person?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I think about it as much as what I'd look for that would help you get the interview. I think that, they're going to be looking for certain skills, certain attributes, certain experiences, maybe. I think the question really is about what you portray when you get the interview. And in my mind, one of the biggest things is like passion. I think when I think to my career, and maybe my industry is unique, it's aviation. It's there are employees at Boeing that, it was a job to them, and they found that job, and it was in maybe the area that they had been educated, finance or accounting or something. But I think what really helps someone stand apart is their passion for it, showing that they think our industry is really interesting, our products are interesting. That's what gets me excited, because I think we all have to remember, you know, coming out of undergrad, you're going to have to be trained. No one is going to expect that you know how to do the job. That's in every industry and every job classification. There's going to be, they know they're going to invest in you. So really what they're looking for is attitude and personality and passion and energy, you know, someone that kind of makes you want to work with them and excited to have them on the team. And I think that just to qualify that feedback is, I think that can be taken to an extreme, and then you're just excited about everything and kind of over the top. You really have to walk a fine line, unfortunately, of doing the research and knowing some things about the company and their products and their industry and such, but then weaving it in a, you know, in a well thought out way. And yeah, and again, just, you know, the other thing is you have to be yourself. You can't be anyone else. You can't force it. They're going to see through that. So do some research and be yourself and be excited about the industry and the work. And at the end, you have to trust that they're going to make the right decision. And that decision can actually be a good decision for you. If you don't get the job, I mean, the way I would think about it is, I was probably going to, you know, even though I think I would have liked it, they saw that, you know, I wasn't the right candidate for it. And I may have been really unhappy, and I'm going to move on to the next opportunity and keep trying. You just have to keep, despite how difficult it is, a really positive attitude, and eventually things work themselves out.
Steph, Chris, do you have any comments on the, you know, how can somebody stand out right now?
Yeah, just echoing off of Sean, I think one thing that always stands out to me when that level of excitement comes in for folks that I've either hired myself or have been on interview panels for, is when someone has an excitement for the job as well. Because a lot of jobs right out of school, like, no joke, that first job I had, for the first 3 months, I was literally copying, like at a photocopier for like hours a day, making copies of people's immigration submission paperwork and of their passports, like page by page, like nothing exciting at all by any one's definition. I mean, maybe some people are really passionate about photocopiers, I don't know, but I wasn't. But I often have gotten nervous in the past, like when I've been interviewing folks, when they come into an interview and I'm excited about this industry and all of these things that I could do that are much bigger than what the job is. And it then like can make me question if they're really excited about the job itself, or if they're just excited about getting a foot in the door to move straight along into another team or another company altogether after getting the experience within the role. And so with that excitement, something that I really love is when I can see that someone's really passionate about the job itself and not necessarily always speaking to what they anticipate it growing into. Because while that will come, especially if you're working hard and passionate about the company and what you're doing, that's not necessarily what a job rec is that you're applying for. And people want to see that you're excited for that job and that you're going to add value to the team that you're being hired to work on. And so that's part of like that fine line that I think for me, like when Sean was talking about that, I was like, yeah, that's part of that fine line. And I misstepped there in my early careers. I'd come in and be like, and within 2 years, I want to be working abroad and this and that and that. And it's like, well, staff, like slow your roll. Like maybe just focus on the job that you're interviewing for and what you can bring to the table for that in particular.
So I echo everything that's been said, and we'll probably repeat it in a different way, but actually wrote down a couple of the things that came to mind. So certainly passion, and for us, the way that I think that we view passion is intellectual curiosity, and so it's hard to convey a great deal from your resume And to Sean's point, you know, you're going to learn the mechanics. You're going to learn the skills of whatever the job is. And so if you're able to convey a sense of intellectual curiosity, the best way to do that in an interview is having, you know, some comfort level, some depth with the job, with the role, with the company. It comes across really quickly. And if you really have done it, then it's genuine. But also, you know, when we're hiring now, that's really what sets someone apart, and maybe even someone who may not be as credentialed or have taken, you know, all of the finance classes. But if it's really clear that they have that capacity to be intellectually curious and kind of a self-starter in that way, that goes a long way. And so that would be, you know, one thing I think that could set you apart. And then the other thing is, well, entry level is okay, right? I mean, entry level means entry level for a reason. And so oftentimes, especially, I mean, I was the same way. I was like, I'm not going to do this. I wanted to go to London and, you know, do banking for hedge funds. Like that's not an entry level thing. So it took me a second to kind of, you know, come back to earth and be okay with that. And I, you know, started at the very ground level Merrill's training program, which is longer than MBA programs. And believe me, it's like very entry level in that way. But I'm very glad I did it. And am glad that, you know, I early enough into the training program was able to say, wait, the entry level part is okay, because that's how I get to, you know, the next levels. The other thing, I guess, is listening to yourself, and throughout the job search process, like identifying how you react to good news, bad news, big or small, because I think the sooner you're able to be that self-aware, the more confident you become as you're continuing to search for jobs and have interviews. And that confidence actually converts into getting a job more quickly, regardless of what the environment's like. And then it serves you really, really well when you start it, because it's just like going to Seattle U for the first time. You don't know anyone, you're far away from home, you're freaked out. It's the same first day of work. But if you're self-aware and you know, okay, here's how I'm like, you know, inclined to react to good news or bad news, or, you know, to groups or things like that. This time, which, you know, can seem super uncertain and fraught and distressing, is actually a really valuable time to just, as woo-woo as it sounds, become in tune with yourself, because I promise it turns into confidence and will probably, you know, turn into a job.
If I could just comment, sorry, really quick, Chris, two things that came up in what you said that I think are really important. Self-awareness is so important. And if you don't know what that means, go Google it and spend some time, because it comes across so easily even in a resume, but in a resume, in an interview, and it's something that is very impressive to see in someone who's, you know, just coming out of undergrad or really any level. And I think that's what it is, something that helps set people apart. It's just so palpable. And then Chris, one other thing that kind of came in my mind when you were talking, it wasn't something you specifically said, but it came in my mind. I think there is a risk of going out and just applying for anything and everything right now, and just, you know, and I can understand that, it makes sense, but I do think that you need to be judicious in, you know, in your search, and really, and again, I think it comes across in the resume that this resume is customized, it was focused, they were interested in this job. It's not just a general resume that they can use to apply to any job, right? And you may, you know, there's the two different methods, right? There's the shotgun method, and then there's this more focused method. And I think you may be able to get a job in the same amount of time is the thing. You may be, you know, the shotgun method does work sometimes. And the focus method may sound concerning because you might think you might not get a job as quickly, but I think you still will. But what I know you will get is a better fitting job, and it'll make you happier, and your happiness will come through as better performance, which will make you more successful. And I just think that that method is, again, they may have similar outcomes in how quickly you get a job or whether you get a job maybe, but I think the quality of what comes out of a more focused search is just so much higher, even though it's gonna be really hard to do in these times, because you just feel like I need to get out in front of everyone and I just need a job, right? It's a scary proposition, but I still think that it's the right method.
Sean, that's perfect. That was actually going to be my next question. And Steph and Chris, if you want to comment on this too, did you hit a point, you know, where it was like that whole panic, like, oh, now I just have to get something, and what's that balance between the panic, finding just a job, and waiting to find the job as best as that can be coming right out of college? So if you went through that, how'd you manage that? Advice around that would be great.
Yeah, I actually went through this twice. One was self-inflicted and one was due to graduating during an economic downturn. I think the self-inflicted version is probably the easier one to talk about, because the internship that I found in London came about pretty quickly, and that was just about being willing to take the risk of this thing that most people hadn't heard of and was a pretty small program, and you didn't really know what you were signing up for, but take a bet on it and show up. The more like self-inflicted time of panic, when I moved down to the Bay Area to get into tech, I did that with no job, no permanent housing, and $1,600 to my name. And I still don't know if that was the best decision I've ever made. Like, I hem and haw over that. It's very easy now to look back and see what has come of that and been like, oh yeah, that was an amazing, like, go me, empowering scenario. But that time I was moving, I was trying to change industries to a city where I did not have a good network. And at a time in my career where I didn't really know how to market myself. And so, like what Sean was saying, having resumes that are tailored to the company, or being able to put my sustainability experience in the terminology and the language that someone in the tech industry and a recruiter for that industry would be able to draw the parallel paths between what I was doing over here for a company making water bottles to a job in the tech industry. And so I did get to a point where I was applying for basically everything under the sun. I would have a goal to apply for 10 jobs a day, as I was quickly running out of my financing and not sure if I'd be able to swing it. And I think what I came to learn is what Sean was saying, is it was very obvious to people that were phone screening me that I didn't put effort in or really care about the job, that I was just desperate for something. And that doesn't mean that I would have been bad at the job, but that also is a greater risk to a hiring manager, because they're not only having to take a bet on you being a good fit for the team that they're hiring in and the culture that they're trying to foster, but the work itself. And that, if you're showing up with like this generic kind of desperation, the prospect of getting a job is likely going to be a lot harder. And so I would really echo what Sean is saying, is around taking the time to be a bit more precise and not, I mean, it's really hard to do as someone who has been through this multiple times. It's really hard to know that you have responsibilities that you have to fulfill. And there's also like, you've been trained and had this great education and you want to take action upon that. And so it's really easy, at least for me, it was, to get in that tailspin of, I just need something. It's actually funny. Chris seeing you here as this amazingly passionate finance person, I had applied to Fidelity. I actually ended up getting a job offer from them. And I was like, what am I thinking? Like finance and me? This, what? No. And so it was also, you know, like, even if you get the offers, positioning yourself into a place where you know you can have long-term success, because Fidelity would have been cool to learn about for about 1 year, and then I would have tapped out because that's not my cup of tea, and then I would have been right back in that position. So that's just more of like a personal living out of what Sean was saying. I think his advice is spot on. Like, be surgical where you can. If it makes you feel better to apply to 10 jobs a day just to like help your anxiety or set up some system like that, like that's great. You also have to survive this in a place of good mental health. But people are going to know if you're applying just for desperation sake or because you're passionate and you have some excitement about it. And that will show through as you show up to phone screens and job interviews.
Yeah, I mean, so I will now share my meltdown moment story because this seems like as good a time as any. I think I would describe my experience as somewhere in between. I had interned, or excuse me, I had studied abroad in London junior year, came back senior year, and was just dead set on moving back there and, you know, working in a very niche area of what's called high finance. And then, you know, the crisis was just like in full swing. I was in London in '08 and just completely oblivious to what was going on. And then, you know, come back and it's like, oh my goodness. And, you know, banks are failing and, you know, we're in a recession, and it's the scenario that, you know, we all now know very well. And so I very quickly saw this, you know, sort of dream job evaporate. And I wouldn't say didn't leave myself any options, but wasn't self-aware enough to know that, you know, I am maybe more than one dimension, and so I could do more than one thing. So I sat in Megan's office and was just like, what on earth am I going to do? Finance is over. I've just wasted the past 4 years. I should have switched to philosophy in sophomore year like I wanted to, like all these things. And Megan was like, I think maybe that's a little extra, like, just, you know, you were wonderful. And so I sort of fell back on those things that I mentioned earlier on, which was like, okay, well, I've had some internships. Why don't I check and see just to have a job if one of those makes sense? And so I did a little bit of the, you know, I'll just get what I can because I need to. But the safety net, I guess, was that, you know, generally you intern somewhere that you at least have some interest in. And so I would describe my career as falling into it because, you know, I had to harass them for 5 months between January and May. And I called the director at the time, I don't know, almost weekly, and just kept going and kept calling. And his assistant was like, nope. Still a hiring freeze, still a hiring freeze, still a hiring freeze. And I was like, that's cool. I'll call him back next week. And so, you know, wore her down or wore him down, I don't know. And finally got, you know, an interview, and it was pretty brief, but he said, you know, the internship goes a long way and we've seen your work and you've got some advocates. And so, you know, we'll see what can happen, but still it was very out there. And so graduating and not having, you know, any prospect stronger than that was totally distressing. And I remember, you know, like my family's around at the graduation party, and what are you going to do? And, you know, I'm trying not to like completely lose it and melt down in the kitchen. And so then I got the offer letter and I was super happy about it, but I still viewed the job as like, I'm just going to like incubate here until the world comes back to normal and I go back to London and do my dream job. And so that was unfortunate in a way because it didn't allow me, I think, to really pour myself into it the way I should have. I did from like a diligent standpoint, but maybe not from a passion standpoint. But then the self-awareness started kicking in very quickly, and it occurred to me that the private wealth industry was way better suited to my personality and skill set and interest than this thing that I was going after. And so I sort of allowed myself to be okay and be adaptable and be a little bit more flexible. And through that, realized I would have been miserable doing that other thing that I totally, laser focused on. And if I don't do exactly the thing that my degree is in, then I'm a failure and da da da. And so, being not so hard on yourself is worth it too. But so that was kind of, I guess, my experience where it was definitely not applying to too many places because that caused me anxiety, but also taking a job because I had a warm connection, and the two of those together with some self-awareness learned on the fly resulted in me having my actual dream job, and I wouldn't do anything differently, and it was the result of the crisis, actually.
Good story, Chris. Thank you. Okay, final quick question, and then we'll get to audience questions. You all three have the gift of perspective. You have a long-term vision now, right? You're 10 years out from that scary time. What quick piece of encouragement do you have to pass along to people who are with us today?
Mine would be to bet on yourself. I think that that's a skill that I've really had to learn, maybe faster than I would have if I didn't graduate during a tough time economically. But even being able to bet on myself, to take the opportunity that came at the point of graduation, built confidence and the ability to kind of navigate, okay, that was interesting, but I actually don't want to go to law school. So what do I want to go into next? And like bet on myself going into this career path that I would have never even imagined around sustainability. And then that built confidence to say, you know what, I think I can hack it in the Bay Area, even though, again, I'm not positive I would remake all of the decisions I did. Around that, because it was incredibly stressful, but it's just, you're going to be your biggest advocate, and you can advocate for yourself by, like working with your mentors or working with the university or just taking risks that maybe make you a bit uncomfortable. But that has been the biggest influence in my career outside of Gail Yates, for being able to navigate and be where I am today, is just taking these chances and betting on myself that I can get from point A to point B, because you all can too. I mean, Seattle U, and the fact that you're here, even trying to learn and navigate what you're doing, these are small ways that you're betting on yourself, and you can carry that forward. And making copies, if you're doing that for the first 3 months of your career and having a bit of a crisis about that, like I did, like it's okay. Like your career is not going to be just that. You'll move along, you'll gain skills, and just keep taking those risks on yourself, or for yourself really, and saying yes to things that maybe you wouldn't have thought of previously, and you'll have like quite the adventure. Like I would say, if there's one word to describe my career, it's been an adventure. And I'd have it no other way. So that would be my top advice.
Chris, is it you or me?
I talked too long last time. I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay. I'm going to take a totally outside approach. I mean, I think I've heard personally a lot of great perspectives and little pieces of advice from everyone. This one's going to sound kind of weird, but I think maybe Chris had kind of mentioned something that sparked it in my mind, and that's invest in your own mental health. It can be obviously a really scary time. And again, I think we've already shown what you're feeling on the inside often shows on the outside. And that stress can be destructive to your own ability to find that job, to do well, or to do well in the interview or anything like that. It is a totally taboo subject, but a lot of people are scared to talk about therapy. I believe everyone should be in therapy. I'm in therapy regularly, even though I feel like I'm a fairly well-adjusted individual. So just be in touch with how you're feeling, and know that if this is really stressing you out, if this is something that is weighing you down, reach out for help. You know, go see someone. It's a sounding board. It's an opportunity to talk out what you're feeling. It'll make you feel better. And I think it'll allow you to show up as your true self, that great person that you are, in your resume, in your interview, in your, you know, conversations with your network. And I think it'll help you get that job faster, the great job that you really want, that career type job, as opposed to just something to fill your time. And it's okay to talk about. Sorry, kind of weird, a little different, not exactly business type feedback, but I think it's life type feedback that I think everyone needs to hear.
I totally agree. I also have a therapist who I adore, who probably does not adore me, but my business partner and I, one of the things that brought us together was just a random conversation about mental health a few years ago, in which I was like, oh my goodness, in the same way everyone has a trainer, or lots of people have trainers at the gym, they should, you know, a therapist is just like a trainer for your brain. And he was like, oh my goodness, that makes, you know, wow, you're totally right. And so I completely agree. I also love betting on yourself. I think both of those are fantastic. And the one I would add is a little bit of a repeat with what I said before, but around being curious, and maybe a more practical way of thinking about it is not being rigid. And you think about it, you know, you spend 4 years studying a particular topic and getting a degree and a certificate that says you are proficient in this subject matter, and you can't help but be rigid in what jobs you're looking for and wanting to make things align. And I would say, try not to be rigid. Try to be curious, try to be open. I am the least open-minded, creative, like, you know, I am so linear, it's not funny. And so anyone that I work with, if they heard me saying this right now, they'd be like, what? He's been talking to his therapist too much. But still, I mean, just that ability to say, okay, I know I've got a degree in X, but those skills are transferable across industries, and you could find yourself in a seat in a job at a company, you know, 10 years removed, that you were like, I never would have gotten there. And so along with investing in your mental health, and along with betting on yourself, of which investing in your mental health is a really good way of betting on yourself, allow yourself the latitude to maybe, you know, try some stuff, or at least explore some things that, you know, because of your degree or because of your major, you might think that you wouldn't be interested in, or that they wouldn't hire you.
Oh, great. Thank you, everybody. All right, I want to make sure we've got some time. If those of you in the audience have any questions for our panelists, hopefully you know how to do the raise a hand feature, or feel free to put it into the chat box to me as well, or to everybody. This question, you guys, I don't think any of you have done grad school, but this person's asking, any advice to grad students specifically?
A lot of my mentees over the years in the mentor program have been grad students. So it makes my whole be adaptable thing slightly less easy to implement, but still MBAs are super transferable skills. And oftentimes, you know, I would say you've had a job or an internship that you've, you know, done before you became a grad student, which can be, you know, helpful to rely on. You're also probably better positioned to get a job sooner than someone else because you've got a little extra experience under your belt. and a little bit more tenure. At least a hiring manager is going to view a maturity on the resume. And so I would use those things to your advantage. Another thing, kind of big into self-talk, you're going to be already ahead of others because you have a graduate degree. And so even if you don't know who else is applying for the same job, it's worth keeping that in mind, because that'll, kind of create a positive feedback loop. And all the same stuff about, using the placement center and relying on the networks and judicious use of LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Great. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
I just add, I mean, I got my MBA as well, and I know how valuable my network is from that. I mean, a lot of amazing people that have amazing careers. You need to lean on that. The other thing that I would add, which is a little bit opposite of what Chris said, I think your experience is a plus because you have more experience than other people. I think the downside can be that employers might think that your expectations then are higher than what an undergrad might want from both what the job is and what the responsibilities of that job and the salary, right? And so I think you also have to think about what your bottom line is, and whether you're willing to say no to a certain job because it doesn't pay as much as you were expecting having an MBA now and all this experience, or the responsibilities aren't quite high enough. And what I would then suggest is if you're really if you're motivated by a job and you're not as worried about the salary or the responsibilities, make sure to make that known, because I've had recruiters talk to me and say, Sean, we're not quite sure why you're interested in this job. We think it's a little lower than, your level and experience, or, it doesn't pay quite as well as you might think. And I had to convince them that, no, I'm actually interested in the company. I'm interested in the job. I'm willing to invest in this by potentially, taking what might look like a step back. So just understand they may have perceptions of you and even though they think you're great, may actually not look at you because they think, oh, he's too this, or he or she is too this or that. So really make sure you get that across if you're really interested in a job, despite the fact that it might look like a step back in certain ways.
Cool. Thank you. We have a couple of hands raised. I just want to make sure. Malia, if you're ready, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for spending your time with us, panelists. I've just seen some really scary articles recently. I think one in particular from Stanford that says graduates graduating into a recession will face lower salaries for up to 10 to 15 years. And I was just wondering if that's something that you've seen in your time in the workforce, because I'm graduating this year and I'm kind of concerned about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer only because I get to nerd out on something finance related for 2 seconds about it. So I would say it depends on really the depth of the recession. We're still in the early stages, and this is unlike other ones in that, in 08, there was like some toxic part of the economy that brought everything else down, and same with 2000, and same with the Great Depression. And this one is different in that we had to intentionally cease all economic activity. And so people don't know, myself included, about, what the other side of it will look like, but it should bode well in that people want to do the things that restart the economy. People want to leave their homes. People want to go to a restaurant. People want to, go on vacation. It'll be different probably for a while, and folks probably can't do it to the level that we were before. But all of our analysts at Merrill Lynch and lots of other, folks in and out of the government that we talk to on a regular basis are thinking that this will look a little bit different. But you know, even even if it isn't, yeah, there's more competition for the same job. Yeah, maybe there's perhaps fewer jobs. Yes, you could argue that depending on how long this thing lasts, the leverage could shift back to the employer from the employee. But we've also all been shown that everyone can work virtually in lots of white collar professions and lots of professions that, you know, Albers students go into, which is very different from before. And so that could create and present opportunities for jobs that, you know, never would have been there after a previous recession. And so I would say that, you know, it's certainly possible, especially if this lasts for a long time, that you could see like a plateau of wages. But the thing I always tell myself, my team, and my clients is nothing lasts forever. And another way of saying it is this too shall pass. And so if there is, you know, some potential plateau in income initially, it won't be that way forever.
Perfect. Thanks, Jay. I have another hand raised. Ben, if you're ready, I'm going to unmute you if you want to ask your question. Thanks, Malia.
All right. So my question is more for graduate students, and it's just something that came up as you guys were talking about kind of that more advice-specific question for grad students. I'm an undergrad graduating in June, so it's not necessarily for me, but I've talked to a lot of hiring managers and mentors and people in senior management at various companies, and some of them have expressed concerns about hiring people with MBAs into entry-level positions or positions that they're overqualified for because of fear that that person won't be fulfilled in that job and there won't be as much learning and growth as they're expecting. And as a result, will end up leaving the company after a very short period of time, which can be quite costly. My specific question is, would you recommend that grad students make sure to apply for jobs that they're not overqualified for, so that they are qualified for? So maybe jobs that are asking for 3 to 5 years of experience or asking for that graduate degree.
It's a good question.
Sorry.
I feel like, Sean, you should maybe go because you've had a grad degree. I was like, I can jump in, but you got a grad degree. So
well, this is kind of a rebuttal in some ways to what I said earlier. And so I guess let me qualify that. When I talked about it, you know, I think that every successful career or successful job experience starts with, I believe, a passion for, or sometimes you may learn that passion through the job, and you're lucky if that happens. But I think that the best seed is having passion for it to begin with. So my example, honestly, specifically was about a job I applied for, was still in aviation, right? And it was something truly I really wanted to learn. And it was a little bit of a jump into a different part of the industry. And so I felt like I might have to kind of take a step back, and I was okay with that. So my earlier suggestion or advice was based on really only in situations where you really have an interest and a passion for and want to get that across, that you're okay potentially taking that step back as an investment. I don't think just in general that, oh, you know, again, back to the shotgun approach, like I have an MBA, but I just need a job, I'm just going to start applying to anything, even if it's entry level. Like, I think that still can come across poorly. I only think that what I described works is if you really have a very specific interest in the industry, the company, the job, and have a storyline that you can get across to them as to your logic as to why this makes sense for you. Otherwise, I do agree that it may not be the most successful approach. Yeah, I don't know if that answers. And Stephanie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I was just going to add that sometimes I think that flexibility is needed even if you don't have an MBA. So like, for example, when I moved to the Bay Area, I basically took an entry-level job, even though I had 3 or 4 years experience, because I was really passionate about the industry that I was joining, which was the music industry, and like super exciting, right? And so I think that, to echo Sean, that even if you find yourself in a couple of years where you want to make a pivot, sometimes if you have that passion, even without a grad degree, you might be in that scenario where you're like, oh, I want to make a pivot from one industry to the next, or from like one job function to something that's vastly different. And I don't necessarily have the exact skills. Like I went into online advertising. That's how I got my foot in the door in Pandora. I didn't know what a CTR was, like click-through rate. I was like literally Googling this stuff for my job interview, and then started entry level and like rebuilt myself into a level within the company that was more challenging for the skills that I had already learned in previous careers and at Pandora itself. So I think that if you have a big passion, there's always a way to communicate that, whether you're someone who has a grad degree and wants to start maybe a level down because you're so excited about the trajectory that that could bring you, or the industry or the product. But that might be a place that you find yourself in even a couple years out of undergrad. If once you've learned more about yourself and what makes you excited and energized going into work, you might find like, oh, I do want to make a big pivot. And that might, part of making that pivot might be to take a step back or a step down. And that's okay too.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I just want to be mindful of time. We're at 1 o'clock. Oh, I have one quick question and then we'll wrap up. One person is asking me, are you 3 okay if folks connect with you on LinkedIn? Just to help build our network. You know, we're all talking about how important networking is. Are you okay with that or open to that? That would be great.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, the only thing I
absolutely.
would suggest is like make a custom message and say that, hey, I heard this, because a lot of people just randomly reach out, honestly, and I personally, a lot of people have different opinions on LinkedIn and how it should be used, but I decline a lot of connections if it's just completely out of the blue and they just use a generic message. So just make sure to let us know that you were on this call and that's why you're connecting, and then absolutely.
Great. Thank you, guys. So thank you, panelists. You're so great. This has been really insightful and helpful. I hope it's been helpful for all of you who've been on with us. And we'll try to email out the recording once it's all finalized. And thank you, panelists, so much. I just wanted to let everybody know that we have a couple more events coming up next week. On Monday, we're doing a webinar on virtual interviewing, which is basically becoming the way interviews are happening. So if you just are a little overwhelmed by that or haven't done any and just want some good tips, we're doing that webinar on Monday, and that information's all in the Handshake events part. And then we're also doing info session with CBRE. So if you've ever been interested in commercial real estate, that's next Thursday. So a few more things going on event-wise. And then, of course, our office, the Albers Placement Center, the Career Engagement Office, we are all here to help you with your career search process, anything that we can support you on, as our panelists so graciously mentioned. We love helping and supporting students. So however we can do that, please reach out and make an appointment with us. So. Great. I think we'll end it there. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate it. And congratulations on your great career journey so far. And we appreciate all the ways you give back to Seattle U. So thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.